Robotic lawn mowers, everything you need to know. If you like technology, you like automating your lifestyle, and you have a yard, you are going to want to see this. I brought back in even more robotic lawn mowers. I'll tell you what, I took a real deep dive. About 7 months ago, I did a review on a robotic lawn mower. That thing has been running autonomously in the yard, cutting the grass with no intervention from me whatsoever, and it looks like a darn golf course out there, which I'm pretty stoked about. So I brought in a couple more. I'm doing a real deep dive, testing these things to the max. These are the latest models from Mammotion, and in my opinion, these are the best on the market. Check these things out. So first up, we got YUKA. Mammotion sent this out to me to test it, and test it I did. I worked it hard. I put it through the ringer, and I'll tell you what, it's a solid machine. Wow, that looks good. The design is killer. It has that robot look to it, like iRobot, and it reminds me a lot of the Tesla. Just really good design here. I like it. It's a two-wheel drive, zero-turn model with a caster wheel, and you can see here that it just makes buttery smooth turns in tight areas. So this is going to be really good for those smaller yards. Climbs a good hill, 45% slope. My driveway is pretty steep too. Take a look at this thing. It's not your typical driveway, so I wanted to put it to the test on a decent hill. Also, look at this. This is super deep grass. It's plowing through. I just wanted, man, if it's going to climb a hill, let's see it. But you'll see here that the caster wheel on the front, it doesn't do 180s real good on a steep off-camber hill like that. So it does kind of spin around. If you have a steep hill with off-camber turns like that, might be a little tricky on this one. So the YUKA has 2 discs on it, which is going to give you a much wider cutting path. It's going to give you nice, smooth, fine cuts. Unlike some of the other cheaper models out there on the market that have 1 disc, it's just very narrow, and it's just going to have to do so many passes back and forth in order to get the lawn. It's just going to be more wear and tear. A cutting height of 1.18 up to 3.94 adjustable via the knob. And you can see here that it just does a really, really nice, smooth carpet-like cut. It has these floating cutting discs, which I kind of thought, is that real? And then I looked and got down and went, wow, that thing is sticking to the ground as the machine's bouncing up and down, just giving you that nice, smooth, consistent cut without any scalping. And here you can just see it making its way around. It'll do 0.15 to 0.37 acres depending on the model you get. 10 zones, that's a lot. So what really sets these newer models apart from the old ones, including the LUBA 1 or any other manufacturer that I've seen out there, is this vision system. It's 2 forward-looking cameras that kind of sees to everything out in front real time, and it aids in obstacle avoidance, also helps it navigate a little bit better. It also has a bumper system on this one. You'll see me testing this to the max in a little while. It was my funnest part of the entire project, was to test all these with a bunch of different obstacles and see how they work. You're going to want to stick around and see that. Next is the sweeper. Now this is out, and I've seen a few people with it. I didn't get mine yet. It's coming soon, and I'm looking forward to testing it out because that's really neat. It's going to drive around the yard, sweeping up the leaves, and then you can also have it go to a predetermined spot and dump the leaves. That's pretty darn cool. If you got some trees in the yard and you want to get it picked up, just one more level of automation, that much less work to do. That's cool. So next up, we got LUBA 2. This is Mammotion's flagship model, the top of the line, the best of the best. If you have the money, you have the property, just don't waste any more time and get this thing. I'm telling you, look at this. It's an absolute beauty from front to back. It's awesome looking. It's shiny. It's new. It looks like a darn race car, and I like it a lot. So the LUBA 2 starts at 2,100. That's a smaller battery unit for smaller properties, and goes all the way up to 4,100 for a larger battery unit for large properties. The machine itself looks the same though. It's 4-wheel drive, and look at this build quality. I mean, mean, it is really thoughtful, and you're going to see later on when we do some testing with some hill climbs where this four-wheel drive really kicks in. Because of the four-wheel drive on this has two different turning methodologies. One is without the zero turn. This is going to do more of a back and forth turning methodology. It's a little easier on the grass. It's not trying to do a four-wheel drive turn, and the other way is a zero turn. Now, in some cases where you have a tight area, a zero turn makes a lot of sense. And I've noticed that I ran this thing like crazy in zero turn mode, and it didn't tear up my turf grass. But just consider that it does a little bit more dragging the wheels with the zero turn method. The four-wheel drive is going to make the hill climbing on this crazy, up to 80% grade, and it climbs up my driveway really easy. So I found a spot on my property where I wanted to make a zone, and I'll tell you what, it's really steep, over some rocks, and it climbed up it with ease, not even the slightest little bit of hesitation on it. So I'm optimistic that this thing can do some really heavy climbing. The LUBA 2 also has a 2 cutting disc system on it. This brings it up to 15.7 inches wide on the cutting width. That's going to make for short work of properties and just less driving around overall. The LUBA 2 comes in two different versions, a short grass version which takes you all the way down to 1 inch for turf grass like I have here at my place, or people in warm climates tend to like that shorter grass. If you have taller grass, it has a high version also that takes you all the way up to 4 inches, so be sure to get the right model that fits your grass. It's all done within the app. There's no knobs on top to adjust, which is a really neat feature, and you'll see that there's an advantage to that, which I'll talk about in a little while. The most inexpensive model is going to do 0.25 acre, to where the more pricey one, that $4,100 one, can do up to 2.5 acres. That is a lot of cutting power out of one machine. 10 to 60 zones with this machine, and if you're unfamiliar with the zones, that's different areas in which you cut. So you make a zone A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you connect them and it'll go zone to zone to zone around the property. Great for front yards, side yards, backyards. LUBA 2 has 3 different technologies to help it with obstacle avoidance and navigation. The most primitive one is just a bumper. When it bumps something, it goes around it. The second one is the infrared sensors, 3 of them on here, and it's got that vision system, those 2 forward-looking cameras. And what's neat is the most recent update on this. Actually, you can watch the cameras real time via your app. That's pretty cool. And again, you're going to get to see in a little while, we put this to the test. Now let's have a look at Old Faithful LUBA 1. LUBA 1 checks in anywhere from $1,750 all the way up to $2,500. It's 4-wheel drive. It'll turn without zero turn mode or with zero turn mode. It'll climb a 75% slope. It has 2 cutting discs, giving it a 15.7 inch cutting width. It'll cut down as low as 1.2 inches all the way up to 2.7 inches in cutting height, all controlled within the app. It'll cut 0.25 acres all the way up to 1.25 acres. You can have 3 to 10 zones. All those stats make this LUBA a very capable machine for sure. So what is the major differences between LUBA 1 and LUBA 2? Well, LUBA 2 has an upgraded computer, gives it a little bit more computing power, allows it to have anywhere from 10 to 60 zones. That's a lot. It has the vision system on it. It has different back tires, which allow it to get a little bit more climbing out of it. It has no side bumpers. It also has an upgraded button layout on the top, which is supposedly better off in terms of not allowing water to get into the unit. As far as the underneath goes, they're virtually identical, but if you look really close behind the rear wheel on LUBA 2, you can see a little speaker there, and it has some voice prompts that come out of it that LUBA 1 did not have. So that's enough about the mowers. All 3 of these are going to be set up the same way. Let's get going. Now that we got the unit fully installed, it's time to get some grass mowed. The way these machines work is you basically walk around the entire perimeter of the property, putting in the GPS exactly the perimeter so that the machine knows exactly the boundary at which it can mow in. Within there, it'll program all kinds of neat stuff and cut the grass. But first, let's get that perimeter in. So we got the perimeter all laid out. It looks amazing. It's a good zone. It's ready to mow. But first we want to run a test cut around the perimeter, because most of the things that go on with this machine, when it comes up and bumps into things along the perimeter, it just triggers it to go into obstacle avoidance, and we don't want that. We want to make sure that our margins are good, so we'll run a test lap around the perimeter, because it always either starts with the perimeter or ends with the perimeter, or when it does a recharge, it'll go to the perimeter and come back. So we want to make sure that it can navigate that perimeter smoothly with no issues. And you'll see here in a minute there is some issues, and I'm going to do an edit within the map, and that's neat. So let's go ahead and do it. So now it'll just go cut, do its job every day, hopefully with no intervention, and your yard's gonna look amazing. But that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to test this thing. I wanna see how well it does in tight turning performance. How well does it turn around in tight areas? On large areas, it's relatively easy, but we get in those tight sections of the yard, it's gonna have to do some turns. Now these machines will do two types of turns. A zero turn, meaning that it turns right in place and stays on the GPS line. The YUKA has that caster wheel. That's going to make it turn in place really easy. The four-wheel drive version, the LUBA 1 and 2, that's going to have to do some either back and forth turning, multi-point turn, or a zero turn, but they both have their ups and downs on that machine, which you'll see in a minute. The multi-point turn on the LUBA just requires a little bit more room to get it done, and if you have a really tight area on the yard and you're mapping, the zero turn is going to be great. But you're going to see with the zero turn, it drags the wheels a little bit. Now, looking at my yard, I ran this thing every day over and over and over and over and over making this video, and it didn't hurt the grass at all. It actually looks better right now than it's looked in a very long time. But let's just look at those performance parameters when we check this out. The most important thing with any tool, safety. What happens if you lift this thing up? The blade stops so fast I couldn't even tell they were ever turning. So there's really no threat there. Also, how do we stop it in the event we just want to stop it right away? The big button on the back, hit it, it stops dead in its tracks, and it's over.
Hey, Rocco, I left a little something out there in the yard for you, alright?
Obstacle avoidance. What happens if we have stuff that's laying around out in the yard? How's the robot gonna handle it? What's it gonna do about it? And not only that, but what methodologies does it have to avoid these obstacles? YUKA has the vision system with 2 forward-looking cameras. It also has a mechanical bumper system to tell when it's touching an object. LUBA 1, 4 infrared sensors, a mechanical front bumper, and 2 mechanical side bumpers so that it can tell where the objects are. LUBA 2, on the other hand, has the vision system, the 2 forward-looking cameras. It also has 3 infrared sensors, mechanical front bumper, but because it has all those other items, it doesn't need those side bumpers. So all 3 of these robots are very capable of obstacle avoidance. They all have different technologies, and because of that, they're going to have different methodologies at going around the different obstacles, which is neat. But let's talk about the different levels in which you can program into the device or set so that it'll handle it different ways. You can have the obstacle avoidance off, and that's where it just runs full speed until it bumps the object and then it avoids it. We're not even going to bother with that. The technologies I like using is level 1. Level 1, it goes up, it uses the sensors to slow down, it'll tap the object so it knows exactly where it is, and then it'll plan an escape route around it. Level 2 is where it uses the infrared sensors and the vision cameras, and it tries to not touch the obstacle at all. Occasionally it'll just barely nick it, but overall it does a real good job at not touching at all. But because it's not touching, it puts a larger gap in between it and the object, which could leave some grass unmowed. But overall, something to think about when you watch this, and this is what I found very interesting, is the different methodologies. How's it avoiding it? And you'll see on some of them, I'm standing there with the tripod and it turns and looks at me and then decides to go the other way. So I don't fault it for that either, but let's see these things in action. This is good stuff. I know what you're thinking. With that wide avoidance pattern, it's going to leave a big piece of uncut grass in the yard.
Hey, you did this to you, right? You left that boot in the yard. Tell you what, you better bring it down a peg, partner. I might Mikey take you out back. He gonna make a real mess out of your face.
scheduled mowing. That's where these robotic lawn mowers really shine. You can do it as often as you want or as little as you want. There is a catch though. If you run the mower nonstop, eventually you're going to wear down your grass and you're going to see tire marks. Again, I've played with this thing hours and hours and hours, and I don't have anything, but the grass here in Hawaii is really resilient. So consider that. Another thing, if you go too long between cuts, it's going to take a considerable amount of grass off the top, which could lead to scalping, require leaf blowing or some sort of raking. I think the ideal amount is about 1/8 to 1/4 inch. So it just depends on where you're living, how quick your grass grows, how resilient it is. All those things factor in. Next, let's talk about zones. This is another really neat thing. You can't get an entire property usually in one zone or one mapping area. So what they do is that you do each zone individually. You can do multiple zones. With these newer machines, you're talking anywhere from 10 to 60 zones. That's insane. I can't imagine ever having 60. I think I have 5 right now. And I pushed on those just to do this video. I was running one zone for the last 7 months and weed whacking the rest, but now I'm sick of that. I'm running the mower all over the place here. So the thing is, you do the individual zones and then you do a GPS track in between them. You can get really creative with this. If you got to go through a fence or something, you could have a small hole in the fence where the robot drives right through. It's very precise how it gets from one zone to the other and how you map those out. So that's really neat. All right, so let's talk about the garages, the charging station. What are the different options with these? LUBA 1 has a standard charging station. Showing it here without the garage on it. Here it is with the garage. It covers a substantial amount of the mower, but not all of it. There's a little bit hanging out in the front there, and that's how I had mine for about 7 months. Here's the YUKA. YUKA has no garage whatsoever. And here's my garage, custom made. Cut a hole that barely fits in there. Auto docks all by itself. Tucks itself fully away, nice and clean. Close the lid on it, and that looks awesome. If you do decide to build your own garage, keep in mind it's got to be really thin building materials, preferably plastic, because it has to be able to get GPS signal through it, Wi-Fi signal through it, signal from the RTK unit through it. All those things have to be in good condition in terms of the signal strength and quality in order for the machine to function properly. So that's a consideration. Manual cutting mode. I've been waiting to talk about this. This is the coolest part about the machine. It's basically a remote control car on your phone. You put it in manual mowing mode, and then it has virtual joysticks. You steer it around and cut wherever you want. It's pretty darn cool. You get to act like an 11-year-old driving a remote control car around. It's 4-wheel drive. Man, it climbs a super steep hill. It does some crazy stuff, and it's really cool to do. So I found the steepest, nastiest little piece of grass on my property, and it's really steep. It's rocky. It hadn't been cut in a while. It's probably about 6 inches deep. So I started with a real high cut setting, worked my way through it. That's why you see me doing so many passes here. You can't just go all the way to nothing. So I worked my way down, had a real good time doing it. I wanted to test it to the max. It was wet under there. It'd been raining for days. So I also want to give an honorable mention here to YUKA. Look at it plowing through this really deep grass. Considering it's only 2-wheel drive, it's pushing it, bulldozering it right out the front. And it did a really good job in manual cutting mode. It was fun to drive also. Really neat product to use on one of these machines, an Apple AirTag. There's tons of discrete locations. Put it on here. Don't tell anybody where that's at. And that's going to notify you real time if the machine leaves the property, exactly where it's at. And you can go pick it up. Bring some muscle. Nah, call the cops. That's a lot smarter. Call the cops and go get your machine back. But also keep in mind that Mammotion's working on the app. I just read something recently that said that they're trying to improve the security measures on there, but there's some thought with if there's no Wi-Fi, how's it going to report to me? So hopefully it'll make that better. But also in the meantime, think about this. This machine cannot be used by anybody else but the authentic owner. There's a serial number in this machine, and it's part of the app too. Without those two working together, talking together, this machine is absolutely dead. It's a brick. It's useless. So what would more than likely happen is a bad guy would take it. They'd quickly realize they can't use it. In the meantime, you're alerted on your phone. You show up with the cops, take them down, and get your machine back. So just think about that with the theft. So the YUKA updates over Wi-Fi, and they do an update probably every other week, every few weeks for sure. And they have a lot of different things that come out. That's one of my favorite things about having a piece of technology like this. You get the existing unit and they just keep making it better. It reminds me so much of the Tesla. But let's talk about the things that are promised that are capable of doing that just aren't out yet in the current firmware. So first off, we got the lawn art. Now lawn art is where they put a picture in the yard, and it's done based on different cutting heights, so the machine will drive around and do this crazy lawn art. Here's a picture of it. I haven't tested it yet, so don't put too much stock into how good this looks, and you probably got to have a pretty decent sized yard for this to work out. Google Home and Alexa integration to give you some voice activated commands is also coming soon to an update, and that's going to be cool. But again, I don't have Google Home and I don't have Alexa. I use iPhone, so I'm looking forward to an iPhone update where I can use Siri. That's one of my suggestions. So if you've made it this far in the video, you're interested in this machine, and they aren't cheap, let me tell you. So we want to take good care of it. We want to keep it washed up, and we want to keep a nice sealant on it to protect it. Now, the wash I like to use, a rinse, you can see it's almost empty. This stuff comes in a larger bottle. You dilute it down with water. It's incredibly economical. What is a rinseless wash for those of you that aren't into car detailing? Basically, you can spray it on, wipe it off, and it doesn't leave anything behind that's going to hurt it or any real residue. So that's nice. And another good thing about the rinseless wash, we don't have a hose running on this expensive piece of equipment, and definitely don't use a pressure washer on this. So it just keeps the amount of water that we're using to keep it clean minimized. That's cool. The next thing we want to do is use a spray sealant. Now, here's my two favorites. I'll have links to all this stuff down in the description so you don't have to worry about it. But a spray sealant, it goes on, it keeps it buttery, slick, shiny, repels water, and overall just makes it incredibly easy to keep clean in the future. And it protects it from water, protects it from UV, and anything else you can imagine too. It's just a small hydrophobic barrier on there that really works well. So when you're using a rinseless wash, spray on as much as you feel like you need to. Don't worry about getting the machine wet. It is waterproof. Just be careful with hoses and stuff like that. Flip the towel, wipe it around. The reason why we're flipping the towel is we don't just want to drag dirt around all over the place. Just keep flipping the towel as needed to keep the surface clean. Once you're done with that, you're all set. We can go ahead and start applying the sealant. Spray it on, put plenty on, use a high quality microfiber towel, buff it to a nice shine until it's super slick, and it's just going to really do wonders. And you'll see here in the rain, it's just beating water. It adds UV protection. It also makes maintenance and cleanup super easy in the future so that you can keep your machine looking brand new. Another place I like to apply the sealant is anything that's outdoors. The garage, for instance. Look, I put some on here and look at the beading on that thing. That's insane. That's going to help really keep that nice and keep it protected. Now, you knew that those standard tests were not going to be enough for me. It's been pouring rain for a couple days. I went out there and I put this thing to the test on that rocky, nasty hill. And I'll tell you what, the results are pretty darn interesting. Check this out. So the first test I did was just up the driveway in the rain, no problem whatsoever. Then here comes that nasty hill. Now these rocks are slick, man. I'm telling you, you would break your neck on them. Look at this thing. It's struggling, it's thinking. This is fully automated too. It's trying to do the zone that I said. I'm not touching anything. It's searching, it's seeking, it found a way up. And man, once it's off those rocks and in the grass, it could climb a way steeper hill. I'm super impressed. But I thought to myself, I got to see this again. Once is not enough. And what's it going to do coming down? It's taking its time coming down. Wow, it just did an amazing job. I can't believe it. I was absolutely impressed this whole time. But we're going to test it again, of course. And here it is. It's heading up on those slick rocks. Man, it's spinning tires all over the place. I'm not surprised. I never thought it would have been able to do this at all. It backed up, rethinking it, taking another run at it. Oh, not happy. Changing its angle. Look at that, getting bite, all 4 wheels are going, made it through the rocks. And man, right up that grass hill, look at that. That is freaking awesome. So the hill climbing ability on this thing was much better than I anticipated, and I had a real good time doing it. From the manual mowing to the hill climbs, I pushed this thing to the max. On that rainy day, I just said, man, I got to show you guys what this thing is going to do, because I hoped to hit a point to where it wouldn't make it, so that I could say, you know, it didn't make it. This is the end of it. But it made it, and it made it fully autonomous, which is neat. So what are my final thoughts on this machine? I have to say right off the bat, this was one of the more fun videos that I've made since I've started the channel, and I've made a lot of videos about a lot of fun stuff. But man, there's nothing like playing with a remote control car, getting the grass done, learning the tech, setting it all up. Man, it's just really enjoyable experience. And then when you're done watching the robot cut the whole property, that is freaking awesome, man. So I had a great time doing it, first and foremost. And also, I'm part of several Facebook groups with people. All they do is rave about how neat this thing is, how cool it is, how much they love it, and the same things I'm just describing. There's a few people that struggle with the machine getting the results that they want, and I have to say, normally that starts with poor location of the charging station, poor location of the RTK unit, or just bad mapping in general. Leave a good conservative margin when you do your mapping to make sure that the machine can get all the way around the perimeter unassisted multiple times before you call it quits on that zone. That's the key. It has to go around the perimeter first or last, or it uses it to get back and forth. If it's bumping off the wall the whole way, you're going to get terrible results. So make sure those margins are good. Another thing, before you even go into the zone process, make sure that you have a great location for your charging station, meaning that there's room in front of it to get in and out, do its turning, docking, make sure all that looks good. Make sure your RTK station has a clear shot at the sky with good satellite coverage. Once those two pieces are in place, then you can go ahead and start with the zones, because if you do it too soon and you start messing with those zones and put a lot of effort into it only to find out that your signal is terrible and you have to move the devices, it's just going to cause remapping and stuff like that. It's just going to be a headache. Another tip for you, when you're starting a new zone or you bring the mower onto the property, keep in mind that your grass is probably a lot taller than you think it is. I went ahead and cut it down. You can see on my lower zones, I cut it down incrementally, knocking it down, getting it down to the 1-inch level where I wanted it. It's going to have scalping. It's going to be brown. You're cutting off all the leaf and there's only the stalk left. Water it good. Keep the watering process going. You'll start to see it fill back in, and the mower will be able to keep it at that new height, and it's going to be an amazing looking carpet down there for sure. Definitely consider building a garage, or at the very least get the cover that you can buy as an accessory. Protect that machine. You don't want it just beating in the sun and rain and all that stuff. It's too expensive for that. I don't care what the waterproofing level is. I want some protection on it, including the sealant. The sealant's a huge thing, guys. After 7 months of using the machine, it wiped clean super easy. It was still slick to the touch underneath. It looked amazing. You'll be able to keep it nice, and that's important. Make sure when you install your charging station that it's not in line with a sprinkler head. The last thing we want is that sprinkler system just shooting water straight at the machine during a watering cycle. That would be bad news. So make sure your speed is adjusted appropriately for the size of your property. If you have a lot of small, tight areas, turning up the speed on the mower where it's going super fast, running up and down the line, is just going to make the accuracy on the edges that not so good. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I'm only bringing stuff into my channel and putting it out in front of you guys when I'm sure it's awesome equipment. You know, I don't want to waste your time, and I don't want to waste my time. You're going to love this machine. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I know it was kind of long, but I wanted to really show what the machines will do, how they'll help you in your efforts to keep your yard good and free up some time and all that neat stuff. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it, and I'll tell you what, this machine gets it for sure. All three of them, LUBA 1, LUBA 2, and YUKA. Oh, yeah, they're awesome machines, and I'll be seeing you on the next one. Yeah.